Chairman. Thank you for your leadership on this bill. I appreciate the bipartisan way in which we've been focused on it. Mr. Chairman, my amendment that I'm introducing this morning would prohibit the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from implementing a recently proposed rule that preempts state management authority that Alaska was actually promised under the terms of our statehood compact and further guaranteed under the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, ANILCA. And, Mr. Chairman, one of the reasons I have to leave early is I'm going to hear a U.S. Supreme Court case on ANILCA that's going to start in about 45 minutes, a big case for Alaska. We are known, I think, without any, not many folks would dispute the fact that Alaska has probably the best management of fish and game of any state, of any country in the world. Yet these proposed regulations, as currently written by the Fish and Wildlife Service, would fundamentally alter not only how we now manage wildlife refuges and the fish and wildlife and habitats on them, but will also change the relationship of the Fish and Wildlife Service and the individual states from one of cooperation, which it should be, to subservience. With these new proposed regulations, which I want to emphasize to the committee, only focus on Alaska, federal regs that only focus on Alaska, the Fish and Wildlife Service will administratively impose via regulatory action a regime that will preempt science-based management approved by the Alaska Board of Game in an open and public process. This is a perfect example of where an agency philosophically disagrees with federal law, so they bypass the will of Congress and seek to regulate policy through their regulations. Again, just on one state, where the agency directives are so far removed from the original statutory language, it's what we refer to as federal overreach at its worst. And no matter what anyone says about this regulation, it is not about stopping predatory control. The Fish and Wildlife Service uses predatory control. The Fish and Wildlife Service uses extensive predatory control and programs to eliminate the Arctic fox, to boost the Pacific black brant populations on the Yukon Delta Refuge, to kill mountain lions in Arizona to support the bighorn sheep, or the barred owl to enhance the survival of the spotted owl. They use these methods right now. The Fish and Wildlife Service does. This action is the Fish and Wildlife Service is simply about controlling resources in my state. The proposed rule is opposed by the state of Alaska. It is proposed by the Alaska delegation, the entire congressional delegation. It is opposed by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, representing the interests of all 50 states, and they have expressly opposed this in terms of many communities throughout the country in terms of the hunting and fishing community. So I urge a yes vote on my amendment, but I'd like to just mention one final thing, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned, this, I believe, is the kind of issue where I would urge my colleagues to show deference to what is going on in a single state. So, for example, in my state, Democrats and Republicans, our governor, who's an independent, our lieutenant governor, who's a Democrat, they're all opposed to this reg. And it's just one reg, federal government, focused solely on Alaska, where we have a tremendous record of managing fish and game. This would be similar, and I'm going to use a few examples. My friend and colleague, Senator Boxer, if the federal government came out with a reg solely focused on the movie industry, only in California, or Senator Carper, the federal government coming out with a reg solely focused on Delaware, the Delaware chemical industry, or Senator Cardin, the federal government solely coming out with a reg focusing on Maryland crabs. In that instance, I would expect and certainly hope that when you spoke on the issue, we would give you some deference here. This is once again, and I'm going to go to the Supreme Court here in 30 minutes on another issue where the federal government in regulations is solely focusing on trying to control my state more. And I would ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for a yes vote on an issue which is enormously important to the state of Alaska. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, the question to Senator Sullivan. Others who want to be heard. Senator Boxer.
I do. We have a lot of wilderness in our state. We have a lot of marine sanctuaries in our state, and we like it when we work with the federal government to tailor rules and regulations to our specific state. We appreciate it because if you just do it for everybody, you may not answer. Now, my understanding of this rule is that it's out for 2 weeks. And there's all kinds of time for public hearings. There's all kinds of times to weigh in. We are talking about wildlife refuges that are not owned by the state of Alaska, but owned and operated by the people of America, because we are one nation under God. We think it's very important, you know, and this rule may have to change. You could persuade me that maybe they're protecting wolves too much or protecting bears too much. It's fine. But the point of a refuge is to ensure that we protect species. So, you know, I think the proposal aims to more effectively engage the public by broadening notification and outreach methods, ensuring consultation with tribes in the state, and allowing for additional opportunities for the public to provide input. I honestly think to do this, I don't remember really ever doing this in this committee, stopping a rule before it's even been issued and stopping the rulemaking process. Again, it's just started 2 weeks ago. The comment period just started. I think we ought to let this run its course, and the senator may be able to well influence me to say, Barbara, take a look at this. They go too far in protecting the bears. You know, I'm very open to it, but I would just argue this, and you know, we see this issue popping up all the time. People taking over a federal area saying, you know, you have no right to tell us what to do, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big issue. And my answer to it is that this is one country, that we all prosper together, we all do well together when we protect, you know, God's creations. And if we overreach as a government, that's bad, and we should pull in. So I'm hoping the senator withdraw this amendment. I would hope we could work together. I'll work with him if it's an overreach and overstep, but I don't think we should stop this in its course. I think it's precedent-setting, and I don't think it's right.
Thank you, Senator Boxer.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may respond very quickly. And I appreciate Senator Boxer's comments, but there's a fundamental issue here. The statehood compact by which Alaska became a state, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, what we call in Alaska ANILCA, all of these granted by the Congress authority for the state to manage our fish and wildlife throughout the entire state, federal and state lands. That's what we are granted by Congress. So this is just a fundamental an attempt through regulations to limit state management of the state of Alaska lands, state and federal. And that was what we were promised. That's what's in federal law. And so I agree with Senator Boxer in that, yes, there is a big principle at stake here. The management of Alaska's lands, state and federal, which were guaranteed by Congress to be managed by state officials, is now being usurped by this reg. So I'm going to move forward and respectfully ask for a vote on my amendment.
If I could respond very briefly.
Senator Boxer.
Thank you so much. I respect that totally. I just want to say that my understanding from my legal team here is that there was nothing in those agreements that overrode, you know, federal law to conserve and preserve our wildlife refuges. Maybe this thing winds up in the court. I just think what we're doing here is, it's not going to fly. It's not going to go. The president will veto the thing. And if it gets that far, and I think that it probably won't even get that far, I just hope we don't stop rules before they're completed, because you may be satisfied. What could happen is, as a result of the outpouring of comments, it could be they decide to take another, crack at it or change it or pull back. I just hate to see us act in this way prematurely. Senator may be, right in his feelings, and I really respect him and like him and the rest, but I do think that we should let this run its course first. But that's the last I'll say, and we'll be governed by the vote.
Thank you, Senator Boxer. My feeling is the most compelling argument is that the rule that is proposed is opposed by the state of Alaska, by the Democrats and Republicans there, the delegation, and I would urge a yes vote. Do you move your amendment?
I move to vote on Sullivan Amendment Number 1.
Is there a second? Okay, clerk, call the roll.
Barrasso. Aye. Booker.
No by proxy.
Bozeman.
Aye by proxy.
Boxer.
I
No.
do that. Okay, let's go back up and repeat that.
Mr. Barrasso. Aye. Mr. Booker.
No by proxy.
Mr. Bozeman.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Boxer.
No.
Mrs. Capito. Aye. Mr. Carden. No. Mr. Carper.
No by proxy.
Mr. Crapo. Aye. Mrs. Fisher.
That's too bad.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Markey.
No by proxy.
Mr. Berkeley. Mr. Rounds.
Aye.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sullivan.
Aye.
Mr. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Whitehouse.
White House. No by proxy.
Mr. Wicker.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 11, nays are 9.
And the amendment is agreed to.